Ethan Cole had never thought of himself as brave. He was 17 years old, thin as a wire, and spent most of his time reading old medical books in his small bedroom on the colony world of Verdun 7. His mother always said he had gentle hands and a good heart. But Ethan knew the truth about himself. He was afraid of almost everything. Verdun 7 was a quiet place. It sat on the outer rim of human space, far from the busy stations and crowded planets of the inner systems. The colony was mostly farmland, with endless fields of wheat and corn stretching toward purple mountains in the distance. About 3,000 people lived there, and most of them were farmers or workers who kept the machinery running. Nothing exciting ever happened on Verdun 7, and that was exactly how Ethan liked it. His mother, Dr. Linda Cole, was the only doctor for hundreds of kilometers. She ran a small clinic in the center of town, and people came from all over the region when they were sick or hurt. Ethan had grown up in that clinic. He had learned to hand his mother the right tools before she asked for them. He had memorized the names of medicines and studied the pictures in her surgery books. But whenever a real emergency came through the door, Ethan felt his chest tighten and his hands shake. He would step back and let his mother work while he stood in the corner, feeling useless. That evening, Ethan was walking home from the supply depot on the edge of town. The sun had already set, and the sky was painted in shades of dark blue and purple. Two of Verdun 7's 3 moons hung low on the horizon, casting silver light across the wheat fields. It was peaceful and quiet, and Ethan was thinking about the new chapter he wanted to read in his xenobiology textbook. Then the sky caught fire. Ethan stopped walking and looked up. A streak of orange and red was cutting across the stars, moving fast and getting brighter with every second. At first, he thought it might be a meteor. They saw those sometimes, small rocks burning up in the atmosphere. But this was too big. This was something else. The burning object screamed overhead, close enough that Ethan could feel the heat on his face. He saw the shape of it now, and his breath caught in his throat. It was a ship. Not a human ship, though. The design was all wrong. It was long and curved, with swept-back wings that looked almost organic, like the fins of some great fish. Strange symbols glowed along its hull, flickering as the ship lost power. It crashed into the forest beyond the wheat fields with a sound like thunder. The ground shook beneath Ethan's feet, and a column of fire rose above the tree line, turning the night sky orange. Ethan stood frozen on the dirt road. His heart was beating so fast he could hear it in his ears. Every part of him wanted to run home. He wanted to find his mother and tell her what he had seen. He wanted to hide in his room and let the adults deal with whatever had just fallen from the sky. But he did not move. He stood there, staring at the glow above the trees, and he thought about what might be inside that ship. He thought about how far they were from any military base or rescue station. He thought about how long it would take for help to arrive if someone was hurt. Someone might be dying out there right now, he thought. Someone might need help. The thought made his stomach turn. He was not a hero. He was not brave. He was just a scared kid who read too many books and froze up during emergencies. What could he possibly do? But his feet started moving anyway. Ethan walked off the road and into the wheat field. The tall stalks brushed against his arms as he pushed through them, moving toward the tree line. The glow of the crash site grew brighter as he got closer, and he could smell smoke and something else. Something sharp and chemical that burned his nose. The forest was dark, but the fire from the crash lit his way. He pushed through bushes and stepped over fallen branches. Following the path of destruction, the ship had carved through the trees. The ground was torn up, with deep gouges in the earth where the vessel had bounced and skidded before finally coming to rest. Ethan found the ship pressed against a massive rock formation at the end of a long trench. It was bigger than he had thought, maybe 30 meters long, and it was badly damaged. Hull plates had been torn away, and strange fluids leaked from cracks in the metal, pooling on the ground in puddles that reflected the firelight in odd colors. Steam hissed from vents along the sides, and sparks flickered from broken machinery. He approached slowly, his hands shaking at his sides. The heat from the wreckage was intense, and he had to shield his face with his arm. He walked around the side of the ship, looking for an entrance, looking for any sign of life. That was when he saw the hole in the hull. Something had torn through the ship from the inside, leaving a jagged opening big enough for a person to walk through. Ethan stopped at the edge of it and peered inside, but he could not see anything in the darkness beyond. Then he heard a sound. It was a low, rumbling moan, full of pain. It came from somewhere outside the ship, on the other side of the wreckage. Ethan's legs felt weak, but he forced himself to keep moving. He walked around the nose of the crashed vessel, stepping carefully over debris and hot metal. What he found on the other side made him forget how to breathe. The creature lay in a pool of its own blood, which shimmered purple in the firelight. It was massive, easily 4 meters long from its head to the tip of its tail. Its body was covered in scales that seemed to shift between dark violet and deep blue, depending on how the light hit them. 4 powerful limbs ended in hands with long, curved claws. 2 great wings lay crumpled beneath its body, torn and bleeding. Its head was long and elegant, with a ridged crest and a snout full of teeth that looked sharp enough to cut steel. It was a dragon. Ethan knew that was not the right word for it, that it was probably some kind of alien species humanity had never encountered before. But looking at it, he could not think of any other word that fit. It was a dragon, and it was dying. A piece of metal from the ship, long and jagged like a spear, had gone through the creature's side. Dark blood was spreading beneath it, soaking into the dirt and forming a pool that grew larger with every passing second. The dragon's eyes opened. They were golden, with vertical slits for pupils, and they found Ethan standing at the edge of the clearing. He felt the weight of that gaze, ancient and intelligent and full of pain. Ethan wanted to run. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to turn around and flee into the night. This creature could kill him with a single swipe of its claws. It could burn him to ash with a single breath, but it did not attack. It could not. It was too weak, too hurt, too close to death. And so Ethan did not run. He took a shaking breath, and he stepped closer. The dragon watched Ethan with eyes that held more intelligence than any animal he had ever seen. There was pain in that gaze, yes, but also awareness, understanding. This was not a beast. This was a thinking creature, and it knew exactly what was happening to it. Ethan stopped a few meters away from the creature, close enough to see the details of its scales and the slow rise and fall of its chest as it struggled to breathe. The metal shard in its side was thick, almost as wide as his arm, and it had gone deep. Blood continued to seep from around the wound, and the pool beneath the dragon had grown so large that it was starting to reach Ethan's boots. "I am not going to hurt you," Ethan said. His voice came out weak and shaky, barely louder than a whisper. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I do not know if you can understand me, but I am not going to hurt you." The dragon's head moved slightly, tilting to one side as if it was studying him. Its nostrils flared, and Ethan felt a warm breath wash over him, carrying a scent like copper and something else, something that reminded him of thunderstorms. He took another step closer, then another. His hands were trembling so badly that he had to press them against his legs to keep them still. He had never been this close to anything so large, so powerful, so completely alien. Every part of him was screaming that he was in danger, that he should not be here, that he was making a terrible mistake. But the dragon did not move to attack him. It simply watched, its golden eyes tracking his every movement. Ethan knelt down beside the creature, close enough now to touch its scales if he wanted to. Up close, he could see that they were not smooth like a fish. They were more like plates of armor, overlapping and fitted together with perfect precision. Each scale was the size of his palm, and they shimmered with an inner light that seemed to pulse in time with the dragon's heartbeat. "You are hurt very badly," Ethan said, looking at the wound. "This metal has gone through your side. I think it might have hit some of your organs. You are losing a lot of blood." He was talking to himself as much as to the dragon. It was what he did when he was scared. He would recite facts and information, trying to make sense of the situation, trying to find something solid to hold on to. "If I pull this out, you will probably bleed even faster," he continued. "But if I leave it in, the wound will keep getting worse. The tissue around it will die, and then the infection will spread, and you will die anyway. It is a bad situation either way." The dragon made a sound, a low rumbling that vibrated through the ground. Ethan flinched, thinking he had said something wrong, but then he realized that the sound was not threatening. It was almost like a sigh, like the creature was accepting what he was telling it. "I am not a doctor," Ethan said. "My mother is a doctor. I just help her sometimes. I read her books and I hand her tools, but I have never done surgery by myself. I would not know what to do." The dragon's eyes closed for a moment, and Ethan thought it might be dying right there in front of him. But then they opened again, and this time there was something different in them. Something that looked almost like curiosity. The creature moved one of its front limbs, slowly and with obvious effort. Its clawed hand reached out toward Ethan, and he had to force himself not to pull away. The hand was huge, big enough to wrap around his entire body if it wanted to. But it did not grab him. Instead, it pressed gently against his chest, right over his heart dot, and then Ethan heard a voice in his head. It was not like hearing someone speak. It was more like having a thought that was not his own, a presence that settled into his mind like water filling a cup. The voice was deep and ancient, and it carried with it emotions that Ethan could feel as clearly as his own. "You are afraid," the voice said. "I can feel your heart beating like a small drum. I can feel the fear running through you like a river." Ethan tried to speak, but no words came out. He could only stare at the dragon, his mouth hanging open, his mind struggling to understand what was happening. "But you are here," the voice continued. "You did not run away. You came to me when you could have fled. That is enough." "I do not understand," Ethan finally managed to say. "How are you doing this? How can I hear you?" "My people can share thoughts with other minds," the dragon explained. "It is how we speak to each other. It is how we speak to those who do not share our tongue." Ethan's head was spinning. He was talking to an alien. He was having a conversation with a creature from another world, and it was happening inside his mind. This was the kind of thing that happened in the stories he read, not in real life. Not to him. "What is your name?" he asked, because he did not know what else to say. "I am called Vethkal," the dragon replied. "I am a diplomat of the Draconer sovereignty. I was traveling to meet with representatives of your people when my ship was attacked. I managed to escape, but my vessel was damaged. I could not control it. I fell here. You were attacked by who?" "There are those who do not wish for peace between our peoples. They tried to stop me. They nearly succeeded." Vethkal's eyes flickered, and Ethan felt a wave of exhaustion through their connection. The dragon was fading. The blood loss was too severe, the damage too great. Without help, she would not last much longer. "I want to help you," Ethan said, "but I do not know how. I am not trained for this. I am just a kid." The dragon's mental voice was growing weaker, but Ethan could still feel her presence in his mind. "You have knowledge," she said. "I can feel it in you. You have spent years learning the ways of healing. You know more than you believe. That is different. That is human medicine. I do not know anything about your biology. I do not know if our medicines would even work on you. I could make things worse. I could kill you." Lethkal's clawed hand pressed a little harder against his chest, and Ethan felt something pass between them. It was not words this time, but images. He saw the inside of the dragon's body, the layout of her organs, the structure of her blood vessels. He saw where the metal shard had gone in and what it had damaged. He saw what needed to be done to save her life. The knowledge settled into his mind like a map being unfolded, clear and detailed and impossible to ignore. "My gift to you," Lethkal said. "Now you have what you need. The question is whether you have the courage to use it." Ethan looked at the wound, then back at the dragon's face. Her eyes were half closed now, and her breathing had become shallow. She was running out of time. "I am scared," he admitted. "All brave creatures are scared," Lethkal replied. "Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is action in spite of fear. You came to me when others would have run. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of being you are." Ethan felt tears forming in his eyes, though he did not know why. Maybe it was the fear. Maybe it was the weight of what he was being asked to do. Or maybe it was because no one had ever believed in him the way this dying alien was believing in him now. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and took a deep breath. "Okay," he said. "I will try. I do not know if I can save you, but I will try." The dragon's mental voice was barely a whisper now, fading like a distant star. "That is all I ask." Ethan stood up and looked around the crash site. He needed supplies. He needed tools. He needed everything his mother kept in her emergency kit back at the clinic, and he needed to get them fast. He turned and started, running back toward town, leaving the dying dragon alone in the glow of her burning ship. Ethan ran through the wheat fields like his life depended on it. His lungs burned and his legs ached, but he did not slow down. Every second he wasted was a second that Lethkal was bleeding out in that forest clearing. Every moment of hesitation could be the difference between life and death. The town was quiet when he reached it. Most people had gone to bed, and only a few lights glowed in the windows of the small houses that lined the main road. Ethan was grateful for that. He did not want to explain what he was doing. He did not want to answer questions or wait for adults to make decisions. There was no time for any of that. He reached the clinic and fumbled with his keycard at the front door. His hands were shaking so badly that he had to try 3 times before the lock clicked open. He pushed inside and ran straight to the supply room at the back, where his mother kept the emergency equipment. The shelves were full of medical supplies, neatly organized and labeled in his mother's careful handwriting. Ethan grabbed a large duffel bag from the corner and started filling it. Surgical tools, suture kits, bandages, antiseptic, painkillers, plasma packs, coagulant spray. He took everything he could think of, everything he had ever seen his mother use during her most difficult surgeries. He also grabbed a portable light unit and a small generator. He would need to see what he was doing, and the fire from the crash would not last forever. Before he left, he stopped at his mother's desk and grabbed a piece of paper. He wrote a quick note in messy handwriting. "Mom, something happened. I had to go help someone. I will explain when I get back. Please do not worry. I love you." Ethan. He left a note on the desk where she would find it, and then ran back out into the night. The trip back to the crash site took longer than he expected. The duffel bag was heavy, and the equipment inside it shifted with every step, throwing off his balance. By the time he reached the forest, his shoulders were aching and he was gasping for breath. Lethkal was still alive. When he found her, barely. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing had become so shallow that he could hardly see her chest moving. The pool of blood beneath her had grown even larger, and her scales had lost their inner glow. She looked like a sculpture made of dark stone, beautiful and still and fading from the world. "I'm back," Ethan said, dropping to his knees beside her. I brought supplies. I am going to try to help you now." There was no response. The connection they had shared was gone, or at least too weak for him to feel. He was alone with his fear and the knowledge the dragon had given him. Ethan set up the portable light and pointed it at the wound. In the harsh white glow, he could see how bad things really were. The metal shard had gone in at an angle, tearing through muscle and scraping against something hard, maybe a rib or a bone plate. The flesh around the entry point was dark and swollen, already starting to die from the damage. He opened his bag and laid out his tools on a clean cloth: scalpel, forceps, clamps, sutures. He lined them up the way his mother always did, in the order he would need them. Then he stopped and stared at the wound, his hands hovering over his instruments. What was he doing? He was 17 years old. He had never performed surgery before. He had watched his mother work hundreds of times, but watching and doing were two very different things. What if he made a mistake? What if he cut something important? What if he killed this creature instead of saving her? The doubt hit him like a wave, washing away his determination and leaving only fear behind. He thought about his mother. What would she do? She would stay calm. She would focus on the task in front of her. She would not think about all the things that could go wrong. She would just do what needed to be done, one step at a time. Ethan took a deep breath and picked up the scalpel. "Okay," he said to himself. "First, I need to widen the wound so I can see what I am working with. Then I need to clamp the blood vessels to slow the bleeding. Then I need to remove the metal shard, piece by piece if necessary. Then I need to repair the damage and close the wound." He had a plan. It was not a good plan, but it was something. And something was better than nothing. He pressed the scalpel against the dragon's scales, trying to find a gap between them where he could make his cut. The scales were tough, much tougher than human skin, and he had to push harder than he expected. When the blade finally broke through, dark purple blood welled up immediately. "Clamp," he muttered, reaching for the instrument without looking. He'd done this 100 times for his mother. His hands knew where everything was. Even if his mind was racing with panic, he worked slowly and carefully, speaking out loud to himself as he went. It helped to hear his own voice, to have something to focus on besides the fear. He talked about what he was doing and why, explaining each step as if his mother was standing beside him, judging his work. The metal shard was worse than he had thought. It had broken into 3 pieces when it went in, and each piece had gone in a different direction. He had to dig carefully to find them all, using the forceps to pull out fragments of twisted metal while trying not to damage. The surrounding tissue blood was everywhere. It covered his hands and his arms and soaked into the knees of his pants. The smell was overwhelming, like copper and salt, and something else, something alien. He had to stop several times to wipe his eyes and steady his hands, but he kept going, one piece out. Then another. Then the third, the largest one, which had lodged itself against what looked like the dragon's liver. He had to cut around it, creating a path for the forceps, and then pull it free with one smooth motion. When the last piece of metal came out, Ethan felt like crying. But he was not done yet. The internal bleeding was still bad, and he needed to close the wounds before Vethkal lost any more blood. He used the coagulant spray first, coating the inside of the wound with the chemical that would help the blood clot. Then he started suturing, closing the deeper tears before working his way to the surface. His stitches were not pretty. They were uneven and rough, nothing like the neat rows his mother could produce. But they held, and that was all that mattered. The last suture went in just as the first light of dawn was appearing on the horizon. Ethan tied it off and sat back on his heels, staring at his work. The wound was closed. The bleeding had stopped. The dragon was still breathing. He had done it. Ethan looked down at his hands. They were covered in purple blood, shaking with exhaustion, but they had done what he needed them to do. For the first time in his life, his hands had not failed him when it mattered most. He started to laugh, a strange, broken sound that turned into tears halfway through. He was so tired. He was so scared. He had never done anything this hard in his entire life, but he had done it. Vethkal's eyes opened slowly, and Ethan felt a faint whisper of her presence in his mind. "You did well, young healer," she said. Her mental voice was weak, barely there, but it was enough. "I am still here because of you, Dot." Ethan wiped his face with a bloody hand, leaving purple smears across his cheeks. "I did not know if it would work. I was so scared the whole time. I thought I was going to fail." "But you did not fail," Vethkal replied. "You succeeded. And that is what matters." Ethan looked at the dragon, at the creature whose life he had just saved, and he felt something shift inside him. Something small but important. Something that felt like the beginning of change. The days that followed were the strangest of Ethan's life. He became a keeper of secrets, a boy living two lives at once. During the day, he went through the motions of normal existence. He helped at the clinic, ate dinner with his mother, and pretended that everything was fine. At night, he slipped away to the forest, bringing food and water and fresh bandages to the dragon, who was slowly healing in the shadow of her ruined ship. His mother had asked about the note he left, of course. She had been worried when she found it, and even more worried when she saw the state of her supply room. Ethan had told her a half-truth, saying that he had found an injured animal in the forest and had tried to help it. She had accepted the story, though she gave him a long look that said she knew there was more to it. But she did not push, and Ethan was grateful for that. Vethkal grew stronger every day. Her scales regained their shimmer, and the wound in her side began to close properly, forming a ridge of new tissue that would eventually become a scar. She could not move much yet, but she could lift her head and speak, both out loud and through the mental connection they shared. Ethan brought her food from the colony stores, careful to take only things that would not be missed. Fruits and vegetables, mostly, along with some raw meat from the butcher. He was not sure what dragons ate, but Vethkal seemed grateful for whatever he provided. She told him that her people were omnivores, able to survive on almost anything, though they preferred meat when they could get it. They talked for hours during those visits. Ethan would sit beside her in the clearing, his back against a fallen log, and they would share thoughts and stories while the stars wheeled overhead. He learned about the Draconer sovereignty, a civilization that had existed for thousands of years before humans even learned to use fire. He learned about their world, a place of mountains and storms and endless sky, where dragons soared on thermal currents and built their cities in the clouds. And he learned about why. Vethkal had been traveling to human space. "My people have watched yours for a long time," she told him one night. Her voice was stronger now, a deep rumble that made the air vibrate. "We saw you when you first left your birth world. We watched you spread across the stars, building colonies and stations, fighting wars, and making peace. We were curious about you, but also cautious." "Why cautious?" Ethan asked. "Because you are young," Vethkal said. "As a species, you are barely more than infants. You have so much potential, but you are also reckless. You act without thinking. You fight over things that do not matter. We were not sure if you were ready to meet us." Ethan thought about human history, about all the wars and conflicts that had shaped his species. He could not argue with her assessment. "What changed?" "We saw something in you that we had not expected. Despite your violence, despite your chaos, you also showed kindness, compassion. You helped each other, even when it cost you. You sacrificed for strangers, protected the weak, built communities where everyone could thrive." Vethkal turned her great head to look at him directly. Those are rare qualities in the universe, young one. Rarer than you know. Ethan felt his face grow warm. I am not sure we deserve that much credit. Humans do terrible things to each other all the time. All species do terrible things, Bethkal replied. What matters is not the absence of darkness, but the presence of light. And your species has light, Ethan Cole, more than you realize. She had been sent as a diplomat, she explained, to establish first contact between the Draconer sovereignty and the human governments. It was supposed to be a moment of celebration, a new chapter in galactic history. But not everyone wanted that chapter to be written. There are factions within our own people who fear change, Bethkal said. They believe that contact with younger species will corrupt our culture, dilute our traditions. They sent ships to intercept me before I could reach your leaders. They tried to kill you? They tried to stop me. Death was acceptable if it achieved that goal. Her golden eyes grew distant, remembering. I fought them off, but my ship was badly damaged. I had to crash land here, on this small world, far from anyone who could help me. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. But you are a diplomat. You were trying to bring peace. How could they attack their own people? Fear makes creatures do terrible things, Bethkal said. It does not matter how old or wise a species becomes. Fear is always there, whispering in the dark, telling us that change is dangerous and strangers are enemies. She lifted one of her massive hands and placed it gently on Ethan's shoulder. That is why what you did matters so much. You were afraid of me. I could feel your terror when you first approached. But you helped me anyway. You chose compassion over fear. Ethan did not know what to say. He had not thought about it that way. He had just done what felt right. My people will come for me soon, Bethkal continued. I have been sending signals since I recovered enough strength. A rescue ship is on its way. That is good, Ethan said, though he felt a strange sadness at the news. You will be able to go home. Yes, but before I go, I want you to understand something. Bethkal's mental voice joined her spoken words, filling Ethan's mind with warmth and something that felt like gratitude. You saved my life. Not just my physical life, but my mission. Because of you, there is still a chance for peace between our peoples. Because of you, the future is brighter than it was. Ethan felt tears prickling at his eyes again. He seemed to cry a lot lately. I just did what anyone would do. No, Bethkal said firmly. You did what most would not. Most would have run away. Most would have let fear control them. You did not. That makes you special, Ethan Cole. That makes you remarkable. They sat in silence for a while after that, watching the moons rise over the trees. Ethan thought about everything that had happened, everything that had changed. A week ago, he had been a scared boy who did not believe in himself. Now he was something else. He was not sure what, exactly, but it felt important. Can I ask you something? He said finally. Of course. Were you scared? When you were lying there? Dying? Were you afraid? Bethkal was quiet for a moment, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. Yes, she admitted. I was terrified. I thought I was going to die alone, on a strange world, surrounded by a species I had never met. I thought my mission would fail and my people would never know what happened to me. But then I showed up. Then you showed up. A sound rumbled in her chest, something that might have been laughter. A small, trembling human child, covered in fear but moving forward anyway. You were the last thing I expected to see, and the best thing I could have hoped for. Ethan smiled despite himself. I am not that small. You are to me, Bethkal said. But size is not what matters. Heart is what matters. And you have a great heart, young healer. Never forget that. On the fourth night, Ethan arrived at the clearing to find Bethkal standing for the first time. She was unsteady, her legs shaking with the effort, but she was upright. Her wings stretched out behind her, still torn in places but healing well. She looked powerful and beautiful and impossibly ancient. "They are coming," she said. "I received word today. My people will be here tomorrow night." Ethan felt his heart sink, even though he knew this was good news. "That is wonderful," he said, trying to mean it. Vethkal looked at him with those golden eyes that seemed to see right through him. "You are sad." "No, I am happy for you. Really." He kicked at a rock on the ground. I will miss talking to you. That is all." The dragon lowered her head until her great face was level with his. "Our connection does not end when I leave this world," she said. "You carry part of me with you now, just as I carry part of you. That bond will remain, no matter how many stars separate us." Ethan reached out and placed his hand against her snout. Her scales were warm, almost hot to the touch. "I never thought I would be friends with a dragon, and I never thought I would owe my life to a human child," Vethkal replied. "The universe is full of surprises." The rescue ship came down through the clouds like a falling star, but slower and more controlled than Vethkal's crash had been. It was beautiful, Ethan thought, watching from the edge of the clearing. The vessel was larger than any human ship he had ever seen, with graceful curves and surfaces that seemed to flow like water. Lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that might have been language or might have been art. It made no sound as it descended, settling onto the forest floor with barely a whisper. Ethan stood beside Vethkal, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. This was the moment when everything became real. He had saved an alien diplomat, and now he was about to meet more of her kind. The ship's hull opened, and they emerged. There were 12 of them, each one as magnificent as Vethkal herself. Their scales came in every color Ethan could imagine, from deep crimson to brilliant gold to shimmering silver. Some were larger than Vethkal, with wingspans that could have blocked out the sun. Others were smaller, more agile, with quick movements and bright, curious eyes. They moved with a grace that made them seem almost weightless, despite their massive size. They spread out around the clearing, forming a loose circle with Ethan and Vethkal at the center. Their golden eyes studied him with an intensity that made him want to shrink into the ground. He felt small and fragile and very, very human. The largest of them stepped forward. He was ancient. That much was clear. His scales had faded to a deep bronze color, weathered by countless years, and scars crossed his body like the lines of a map. But his eyes were sharp and clear, burning with an intelligence that made Ethan feel like he was being examined down to his very soul. "So this is the human," the ancient dragon said. His voice was like thunder rolling across mountains. "The child who saved our diplomat." Vethkal moved to stand beside Ethan, a gesture of support that he appreciated more than he could say. "This is Ethan Cole," she said. "He found me after the crash. He performed surgery on me, using skills he had learned from his mother and knowledge I shared with him through our bond. He saved my life, Elder Krathon." The elder dragon, Krathon, continued to study Ethan with those burning eyes. "You are young," he said. "Even for a human." "Yes," Ethan managed to say. His voice came out as a whisper, and he had to clear his throat before continuing. "I am 17 years old." 17, Krathon repeated. "I have scales older than your entire species." He tilted his great head, considering. "And yet here you stand, having done what many of my own people could not. You saved a life that was meant to end. You changed a fate that was written in blood." Ethan did not know how to respond to that. He stood there, feeling the weight of a dozen alien gazes pressing down on him, and tried not to shake. "We have watched your species for a very long time," Krathon continued. "We have seen your wars and your cruelty. We have seen you destroy your own world and spread like a plague across the stars. There are those among us who believe you are too dangerous to contact, too violent, too unpredictable. The other dragons murmured in agreement, a sound like distant thunder. Ethan felt his heart sink. He had hoped for something different. He had hoped that saving Vethkal would mean something. But we have also seen your kindness, Krathon said, and his voice softened just slightly. We have seen you protect each other in times of crisis. We have seen you sacrifice for strangers. We have seen your art, and your music, and your stories. All the beautiful things you create, despite the darkness in your nature. He stepped closer to Ethan, close enough that the boy could feel the heat radiating from his ancient scales. And now we have seen this. A frightened child, facing something beyond his understanding and choosing compassion over fear. Choosing to help when he could have fled. Choosing to save a life that was not his own. Krathon lowered his head until he was eye level with Ethan. Those golden eyes, older than civilizations, looked into his with something that might have been respect. The Draconer sovereignty will remember this night, the elder said. We will remember Ethan Cole of Verdant 7, and when we speak of humans in our councils, we will speak of the boy who showed us that your species has something worth protecting. Ethan felt tears running down his cheeks, but he did not try to stop them. I did not do it for recognition, he said. I just did what felt right. That is precisely why it matters, Krathon replied. The purest acts of courage are not performed for reward. They are performed because they must be. Because something inside you cannot stand by and watch suffering when you have the power to help. He lifted his head again. That quality is rare in the universe. Rarer than you know. Guard it well. Vethkal stepped forward and placed her hand on Ethan's shoulder. The elder speaks truth, she said. What you did was not small or simple. You changed the course of history tonight. Because you saved my life, I can complete my mission. I can bring word of humanity to my people. I can argue for peace and cooperation between our species. She turned him to face her, and in her golden eyes he saw warmth and gratitude and something deeper. Something like love. You did not just save one dragon, she said. You may have saved millions of lives on both sides. You may have prevented wars that would have torn across the stars. All because a scared boy decided to be brave. Ethan looked up at her, at this magnificent creature who had become his friend, and he realized that she was right. He had been scared. He was still scared, standing here surrounded by beings who could crush him without effort. But he had done it anyway. He had faced his fear and come out the other side. I used to think courage meant not being afraid, he said quietly. I thought brave people did not feel fear, that they were just different from me, better than me. And now? Vethkal asked. Now I know that is wrong. Ethan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. It is having shaking hands and a pounding heart and still moving forward. Krathon made a sound that rumbled through the clearing. It took Ethan a moment to realize it was laughter. The child understands what many never learn in 1,000 years of living. Perhaps there is hope for your species after all. The rescue ship's lights began to pulse in a new pattern, and Vethkal looked toward it with something like reluctance. It is time for me to go, she said. Ethan nodded, even though his chest ached. I know. She knelt down so they were face to face, and she pressed her forehead against his. Through their bond, he felt a rush of emotion, memories, and feelings flowing between them. He saw himself through her eyes, a small figure in the firelight, approaching when others would have run. He felt her gratitude, her respect, her hope for the future he had helped make possible. We will meet again, Ethan Cole, Vethkal promised. When our peoples stand together as friends and allies, you will be there. You will be honored as the one who made it possible. I would like that, Ethan said. She pulled back and rose to her full height, spreading her wings wide. The other dragons were already moving toward the ship, their forms silhouetted against its glowing hull. "Remember what you learned here," Bethkal said. "Remember that you are braver than you know. Remember that you can change the world." And then she was gone, rising into the air with a single powerful beat of her wings. The other dragons followed, and one by one they disappeared into the ship. The hull sealed behind them, and the vessel began to rise, lifting silently into the night sky until it was nothing but another light among the stars. Ethan stood alone in the clearing, surrounded by the wreckage of the first ship and the memory of everything that had happened. He looked up at the stars, at the infinite darkness between them. And for the first time in his life, he did not feel small. He felt like a part of something bigger. He walked home as the sun began to rise, casting golden light across the wheat fields of Verdun 7. His mother was waiting for him at the clinic, her face lined with worry that turned to relief when she saw him. "Where have you been?" she asked. "What happened to you?" Ethan looked at her, at this woman who had taught him everything he knew about healing, and he smiled. "I will tell you everything," he said. "But first, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Can you teach me more? Not just handing you tools or reading books. Real training. I want to be a doctor. A real one." His mother studied him for a long moment, seeing something in his eyes that had not been there before. "What happened out there?" she asked again, softer this time. Ethan thought about dragons and courage and the weight of stars. "I found out who I want to be," he said, and for the first time, he believed it.